Hello my gems, and welcome to the first real video on this channel. We are going to be doing something that I've been looking forward to for over 3 years now. I purchased this deck secondhand, and shortly after I purchased it, I ended up moving to another country, and this deck unfortunately got left behind, and it was stuck in a box at my parents' house for over 3 years. So I want to give it a proper interview and start using it now that I finally have it back in my possession. So one of the reasons that I'm so excited to work with this deck is because of its age. Now, as you can see from the card box, it definitely looks like it's seen a fair amount of wear and tear over the years. This is the Aquarian Tarot, by the way. This deck is going on 50 years old, so like I said, that's definitely one of the reasons why I'm so excited to have my hands on it again. And we are going to be giving the deck a proper interview because I would really like to start using it and I want to get to know it a little bit better first. So everyone has a different method for doing this. Some people don't do this at all, which is totally fine too. You can practice your divination however you think is best for yourself. I like to do a little interview before I start using a deck just to get an idea for what I'm getting myself into and what I'm getting the cards into. I actually have a specific spread that I like to use for this that I've made myself, so if you would like to use it as well, please feel free. I'll put a link in the description box to it. I might use it for my Instagram photo today, actually. So if you check my Instagram, you'll be able to see exactly how I do this, and you can replicate it yourself for your own decks. So we are just going to shuffle these up here. This is how I shuffle my deck. Everyone does it differently. I do read reversed cards. I know not everyone does. So I will shuffle them all around, turn some of them upside down, and then I just stop once it feels right. I usually like to end with 3 cuts, so just like that. And that is typically how I finish mine. So we are going to be reading first Define Yourself, which is what some would call, I guess, the significator card. This can be consciously chosen, like you can pick any card out of the deck for it if you're reading for someone else and you already kind of have an idea of what you consider of them or what they consider themselves. Obviously, I'm letting the deck choose its own. So this is the card for how the deck defines itself. What kind of lingering energy do you still hold on to? So this could be positive, this could be negative. The next one will be strong points. Next is weak points. This one is what kinds of readings do you prefer to do? There we go. Okay. This one is what kind of readings do you dislike? And then, do you wish to be used in readings for others? So that one is also pretty self-explanatory. I typically use my decks in readings for myself, of course, although not everyone does. That's actually another video that I want to make later, all about tarot superstitions and traditions. I think that would be a lot of fun to explore. Things that people think are okay to do with cards, things that people would never do with their cards, so I just think that would be interesting. Okay. Next, and the final card for this spread, is what is our potential in working together? So, there we have it. This is our spread. Okay, that is much better. Alright, so we will be going through card by card and kind of picking all of this apart and seeing what our new deck has to say to us. Okay, so we will start with the first card, of course, this one here. Okay, so the first card we've drawn is the Page of Swords. Now, the pages as a whole are considered to be cards of new beginnings, fresh starts, youthfulness. Even though it's coming on 50 years old, it's still very young at heart. These cards don't seem to have a lot of focus on earthly elements, from what I'm noticing just looking out at them like this, which is totally fine, but just using what I know from typical Rider-Waite tradition, the sword cards tend to relate a lot to air, things like change and force, for good or bad. Judging by the rest of what I'm seeing out here, I'm going to assume that it is a good thing. It can also mean action. Basically, with these two things combined, being a page card, being a swords card, I'm seeing a lot of very, what I guess you would consider like strong, very gung-ho kind of energy. So this is a deck that wants to be read, it wants to be able to interpret things, and it likes having a job, basically. I definitely see this being the type of deck that I would enjoy working with. So let's move on to the next card now, which is the Nine of Pentacles. Now, Nines cards are most typically associated with completion, endings, the final step in something. So, Nine of Pentacles in particular is what's typically considered to be a really great omen, especially in the position of being the energy that this deck associates with itself. I consider that to be really, really great. So when I cleaned this deck, I just gave it like a quick brush over with some smoke. I didn't really deep clean it as one might with a used deck, in the off chance that it did have really great energy attached to it, which this one definitely seems to, and I'm firmly in the camp of if something has good energy, I mean, why would you want to get rid of it, right? If this deck has been used and well loved, and the energy attached to it isn't negative, then I don't want to get rid of it, I want to hold on to it. So, with this being, I get it to focus here. Come on, there we go. With this being the Nine of Pentacles, I definitely think that I made the right choice. So, I think that this deck has awesome energy, it's very happy and willing to start something new, to work, hopefully with me, and possibly with others as well. And I'm really, really looking forward to reading the rest of this now, just judging by what we've gotten so far from up here. Okay. So now we move on to this deck's strong suits. So the Devil card, reversed, is often associated with breaking chains and freeing yourself from something very negative, typically addictions. It can also be people. I know that this is sometimes seen as a card of divorce. In the context of this spread, I would take this card to mean that this deck's strong suits are helping people realize things that they need to let go of, be it addictions, people, anything really that's causing you harm that you may or may not realize, and that you would be much better off without. The next card in our spread is the Eight of Wands, or in this deck, they are called rods. This is a card of determination, intuition. It could also be a card of ambition, being concise, and seeing things through to the end. And I would take this to mean that this deck has trouble with staying on topic, right? That last final push towards the end to really drive a point home, or to help you really understand the bigger picture in something like a reading, it may have trouble with kind of getting you to that final step, right? Which is okay. I think that kind of comes along with having the page energy that we talked about up here, the youthfulness, kind of darting around from one idea to another. So that's not necessarily an awful thing. It's more like I think an immaturity thing, or maybe even just that the deck has a lot to say, and because of that, it doesn't always get to the point right away. I can relate. Okay, so now we're moving on to what kinds of readings do you like to do? Which is definitely an important question to ask. I have a few decks that I don't use for, say, love readings, or one deck in particular, it's actually my first deck, is a little bit, I guess you could say, on the grouchy side. It doesn't like being used for frivolous things. I don't use it for reading other people anymore. It's a little more serious. It takes itself very seriously, which is totally fine. I also have another deck that is very whimsical, doesn't mind those kinds of things. I do tons of love readings with it, or at least I used to more. We're going to find out now what this deck likes to be used for. So, the Ace of Swords. So, we've gone over swords already, right? It's an air card. It has to do with intellect and the mind. Basically anything to do with, like, your conscious mind. So, learning, problem solving, which I think is kind of the direction that we're definitely going to be leaning here, especially since it's the Ace of Swords, which is a card of beginnings. So I would definitely say that this deck is kind of in the vein of, like, problem solving, helping you come to decisions that maybe you subconsciously already knew the answer to, but using the deck as a tool to help you really figure out exactly what it is, like what the core of the issue is, or why you're struggling with the decision. So that's really nice because I don't have a deck like this. Most of mine definitely lean more towards the spiritual side of things. They like being used for more like psychic, fortune telling, future sight kind of readings, or like really lighthearted things, love readings and friendship and that kind of thing. So it's definitely nice to sort of round out the package here with a deck that would prefer to be used for something like intellectual decisions. So I am very glad to hear that. Also, this card is beautiful. I just want to showcase this for a second here. The roses, the colors, this is so pretty. We'll definitely be taking a closer look at some of the cards once we're done with this interview. Okay, so next we have the Seven of Cups reversed. So, sevens are typically a card of strife and struggle. The sevens are also a card of having to make choices, so definitely in line with what we talked about earlier. Things that can kind of lead you one way or another. So the Seven of Cups reversed definitely signifies like having to make a choice that might seem good but isn't necessarily good for you, or making a decision based on what other people want you to do instead of what you should be doing. So I would take this in the dislikes to mean that this deck doesn't want people to use it and then not take its advice. It doesn't want to help you with some kind of intellectual issue or help you problem solve something just for you to choose the wrong thing anyway, right? And I can understand that. I've definitely been in the same position before with friends or family, where you try to give them the best advice that you can, and then for whatever reason, they still go ahead and do something that is completely to their detriment. So next up we have the card in the position of, do you want to be read for other people? Now, this is one of the only major arcana that showed up in this spread. So I take that to mean that this is something that the deck takes very seriously. and we have Temperance inversed, and that is definitely a very strong opinion, which is fine. I'm glad. Temperance reversed is a card of excess, telling you that you need more moderation because things are unbalanced. Upright, it would be a card of balance. So, reversed, it definitely, to me, is saying that, you know, good things in small doses, basically. If I do want to read for other people, it would need to be very sparingly. I don't think this deck would enjoy being used, say, by someone who reads, like, professionally, doing readings for other people. I think this deck would be miserable doing that. I'm going to say that this deck feels very strongly that being read for a lot of people all the time would make it miserable, so I'm not going to do that, which is honestly just as well because I adore this deck, and I'm also in the camp of I don't like people touching my cards. And some people care, some people don't. Some people prefer to have other people touch their cards if they're reading for them to get that person's, energy and vibe into the deck, but I don't like that. I like my cards to be touched by me. I don't like other people's hands on them. One, because I don't want their energy or vibes or whatever in my deck, but also because I just don't want other people's, and not that other people are, dirty.
Okay. So, that was a lie. Now, people are dirty. Okay? Just hear me out. I used to read at parties for friends. Drunken parties, by the way. And it's all fun and games until somebody walks by, stumbles by with their greasy Cheeto dust fingers, and they grab your deck of cards or grab a specific card to look at it, and it just makes me cringe internally and probably externally as well. So I don't let people touch my cards anymore. And it's not just like it was one bad experience or something. It's just the idea of it, people don't clean their hands as often as they should, and I just want as little residual gunk on my cards as possible. So no offense to anyone who does let other people touch their cards. I don't care. You can do whatever you want. They're your cards. But for my cards, I prefer people to, look and appreciate. And if they want a reading, then they can have one. But just keep the, keep your mitts off, basically. So, I don't know why I lied about it. I shouldn't have, and I'm sorry. Now we can get back to the video.
But with this deck being 50 years old, I'm going to be very careful with it, and I'm very careful with my decks anyway. I just don't want people accidentally bending corners or scuffing the edges of them, so like I said, this is just as well. So in our final position here, which is what is our potential in working together, we have the Ten of Cups reversed. And honestly, I can't say I'm terribly surprised by this. So, the Ten of Cups reversed is a card of misalignment, disconnection, a troubled relationship, and I can definitely see why. So, I don't typically do the types of spreads that this deck seems to be more in line with, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I take this to mean that it's just something that we're going to have to work on, which is fine. All good relationships need work, so that's totally fine by me. I typically use tarot more for future sight, psychic, and other consciousness side of things instead of the intellectual subconscious types of readings that this deck is definitely wanting. So that's, like I said, that's totally okay with me. I am definitely more than willing to work with that and to not grab this deck when I'm looking for a different type of reading. So I think that maybe in 6 months from now or something, I may do another spread, not like this, not another interview style, but maybe just a check-in, you know, to kind of see where things are at, because I definitely see where this deck would be a little hesitant to, you know, commit to working with me. Which, like I said, is totally understandable, but that just means I've got something to prove, which is fine. I really, really enjoyed doing this, and I hope you guys did too, because I thought that was very enlightening. So we are just going to go through now, and people do this a lot differently too. So when I'm putting cards back in, I just kind of split the deck in several places like this, and just sort of feed the cards back in. I'll turn some of them upside down as well, so that way they're not all starting out in the same position that they were in during the spread. Okay, so now we are going to do a little overview of the deck. If you guys are interested, let me know down below if you would like to see full deck breakdowns. Things like going over the imagery chosen, color palette, style, you know, just what makes the deck unique, basically. So if that sounds interesting to you, definitely let me know. Oh my gosh, yeah, these cards are just gorgeous. The colors are so pretty. I am definitely a big fan of drawn cards, so I'm not really very attracted to like decks that use like mixed media, like actual images of people and that sort of thing, or pictures from real life, like photographs. In this medium, at least for me, I tend to just read them better, more accurately, I suppose. I can pick out a lot more pieces of the imagery and sort of apply that to whatever it is I'm looking at. So yeah, these are all so pretty. Also, I've got to say, being 50 years old, these cards are in great condition. Hold on, let me get out like one of my brand new decks that has white sides. Actually, this deck isn't even new. This one's also several years old, but still not even close to 50. And look at the difference. Just the difference in use too. I imagine this deck was owned by somebody who definitely read it a lot, just based on the sheer amount of discoloration on the sides and the wear on the faces. It's really pretty. Honestly, like, this deck aged so beautifully. This is definitely one of my favorite decks I own, in case you can't tell. Yeah, these are really, really neat. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, definitely let me know down below if this is something that you would like to see for other decks. I have a couple newer decks that I haven't used yet, and I would definitely be willing to film another one of these if you guys would be interested in seeing another interview. It probably wouldn't be quite the same because the other decks in question are Oracle decks. Oh, and I forgot to show you guys the backs. They're just this really gorgeous, like, royal blue. They're so pretty. They're just plain, which honestly I kind of like. I don't have another deck like this. Most of them have very busy looking backs, so this is kind of a refreshing change. That is my Aquarian Tarot deck. It is, like I said, 50 years old, and it is really beautiful. The box also has aged an incredible amount. This thing is, like, crusty. Not in a bad way, though. It's just seen, like I said, a ton of use. So if you guys are interested in this deck, you can definitely get a little screen cap if you need one of the back here, or just pause and go see if you can find a listing on eBay or Etsy or somewhere. There are a couple decks that I keep an eye out for like that, just because they're old and out of print. I don't know if this deck originally had a booklet. I kind of don't think that it did, just judging by how close to the top of the box the cards sit. I kind of doubt that it came with one, but I could be wrong. So If it did, I don't have that. Like I said, I bought this secondhand. So, anyway, that was a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this. If you did, please subscribe if you'd like to see more videos and get notified whenever I post. I plan on uploading on Fridays, so definitely check back on Fridays because sometimes the YouTube notification system doesn't work. Like this video if you liked it, and leave me a comment if you have any suggestions for improvements or if you have any ideas for videos that you would like to see in the future. I wouldn't say quite a few decks because I know some deck collectors have, well into the hundreds of decks, but I have a few that I could definitely showcase for different things. So if you have something in particular that you're interested in, let me know. Alright, thank you guys so much for watching. Stay divine, and I'll see you next time. Bye.